Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Membership Voice. I'm Kero O'Shea, the coordinator of The Voice and the host for this evening's webinar and interview with our special guest, Mark Huddleston, the Zone 8 Chair of Club and Cultural Transformation. I've been a fan of Mark's for many years, and I'm absolutely thrilled that he's been able to join us tonight. Hey, Mark, how are you, mate?
Good evening, Kero. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's lovely to see all these intrigued faces joining us tonight.
It is, isn't it? But at this stage, it's important for me to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting tonight's webinar here in Perth. I acknowledge the strength of their continuing culture and offer my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Let's get going. Mark's time is valuable, and I know all our audience's time is too. Kicking off, mate, we've had a number of great conversations over the years. And I've been, as I said, thrilled that you're doing this job, because I think we need an innovator leading cultural change in regionalisation. Not everyone knows you, perhaps as well as I do, mate. Tell us about your membership journey.
Thanks very much, Kero, and again, welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight. It's a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, look, my Rotary journey actually started as a Rotaract. I joined Rotaract when I was 18, was in Rotaract for 10 years, and was then invited to join my sponsoring club, which is the Rotary Club of Edwardstown. I see there's at least one Edwardstown member joining us tonight. And was in that club for 19 years before starting the Rotary Club of Seaford. But this particular membership journey started around about 2008. I was the immediate past president of that Edwardstown club, which at the time was a fairly typical traditional club. And, you know, questioning where the new members are coming from, that sort of thing. And I was, for the most of the time I was in that club, I was probably 20 years younger than the average member, but always very much accepted and welcome and felt very much appreciated. But probably my ideas about the traditions and rituals were a little bit out of kilter with the rest of the club. And I must admit, I was beginning to get a little bit uncomfortable with some of those rituals and traditions and sort of trappings of office and flags and bells and all that sort of stuff. And one day I read an article in Rotary Down Under magazine, and Kero, you'll be right up with this, about two new clubs that have started in Perth. And they were the Rotary Clubs of Crawley and the Rotary Clubs of Freshwater Bay. And that article was about how these clubs were doing things very differently. They didn't have the food. They had a very casual meeting with cocktails or finger food, that sort of stuff. I specifically remember one word in there was called, we do it without the flim flam, without all the extra stuff, and how these clubs were so successful and they'd launched, they were something very new and modern at the time. And that really inspired me. And there was a club assembly at that former club, Rotary Club of Edwardstown, that came. And there's always an option, an open forum, get up and say what you think. So I took this opportunity to get up and say what I thought. And I just let it rip. I'm sick of the prayers. I'm sick of the toasts. I'm sick of that. Like I really vented my spleen, half expecting to get some rotten tomatoes thrown at me. To my shock and horror, I got a standing ovation. And as it turns out, the overwhelming majority of that club supported what I had to say. There were perhaps a couple of members that didn't, but no one was keen to say any of it before. So I'd gone from this situation of thinking a bit uncomfortable to getting really uncomfortable, and thinking I was the only person who felt that way, to all of a sudden feeling that pretty much the whole club felt that way. So it was not much longer after that the first of three national membership conferences were held in Canberra. I got to two of them. I met you, Kero, at one of those three. And my club decided that they were going to start a journey of change and transformation after my little event at the microphone. And I would be on a committee that would look into some of these changes. And they decided, to their credit, they would sponsor me to go to this conference in Canberra. They'd pay my airfares, they'd pay the registration, they'd pay my accommodation, they paid for a hire car. On the proviso, I learned as much as I could and came back and presented to the club about it. So I went off to this thing and was just staggered. This was convened by the great Stuart Hill, one of my heroes. who was I think a former RI director at the time. I can't remember, but someone who's always really impressed me. And it was just an amazing weekend. There were 400 people there, and they were all looking for ways to modernise and change and improve Rotary. And I was in my element. So I'd gone from thinking I was the only person who thought this way to, well, actually, most of my club thinks that way, to going to this event where, well, there's at least 400 Rotarians from around the zone that feel similarly. And of course, I got back to my club and made a presentation on one night about what I'd learned, what I'd suggested. And unbeknown to me before the night, there were a couple of visitors from another club doing a makeup, one of our neighbouring clubs. And they came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, Mark, that's wonderful. Do you want to come and talk to our club about it?" Oh, okay, no worries. So I turned up to their club about a month later, and what I hadn't, again, unbeknownst to me, they'd invited people from about 8 other clubs to turn up. So all of a sudden, I'm on the speaker circuit sort of talking about change and innovation in Rotary. And 3 months earlier, I had that little talk sort of on the microphone where I vented my spleen. So I didn't actually ever start out looking to be what I would call a membership specialist. What I started out really passionate about was best practice, innovation, making Rotary more attractive. And I think as a result of that downstream, you have membership improvement. So that getting the product right thing, improving the product has always been something on my mind, something I've always been really passionate about. And I started conversations with people around the zone at that event. Then, of course, I met you. I think it was the third one. I think it was the second one I didn't make, which was about 5 years later. And again, refostered some of those contacts from right around the zone. And we've been having those conversations sort of ever since. Now, this is going back 16 years ago now. And way back then, we were having conversations about how we could potentially do this thing better at zone level. So 10 to 16 years ago, we were having these conversations. So I've become quite good friends with Andy Rajapaksa, who I dare say might not be joining us tonight. He's in Romania at the moment, of all places. We became quite good friends. He supported me a lot through my book. I've spoken in that district more than any other district. He ended up getting into the position on the regional council. And probably about 12 to 18 months ago, he said to me, he offered me sort of this role and said, what would you do at zone level to sort of change membership outcomes? And well, it only took me about 12 hours to give him the answer, because they're things I'd been talking about with other people around the zone for sort of the last 12 years. So I spat out this list of things I thought we could do. And he said, "Oh, that sounds pretty good. You can have the role." So that's sort of how I found myself in this position. And my good mate, Tony Hayward, who is actually sitting next to me on my Brady Brunch-like grid. I don't know where he sits on everyone else's grid, but he's chuckling away. He said to me about 12 months ago, and I remember this conversation, he said, "What we need is cultural transformation." And of course, Tony's a marketing guy, as is Andy. And I thought, like, talking about culturally transferring Rotary, you must be crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more it sunk in. I thought, no, well, actually, they're spot on. That's exactly what we do need to do. So let's start a process of trying to do it. And that's sort of what I'm trying to achieve at the moment. And that's what's led me to the situation I'm in at the moment. So there's a brief history of Mark's membership journey. Hopefully there's plenty more years to come.
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope you're not planning to give it away anytime soon. Okay, mate. You've talked about a thing there, something that we've probably got to get our heads around. This thing, this Rotary experience, this product. Why is it important to get that right?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Kero. It's almost like that was rehearsed, wasn't it? I'm actually going to just share my screen just for a brief moment. I've got a very short and brief, and promise not to be too boring presentation. It's only going to go for a few minutes. But I just want to share a few concepts that have been whizzing around in my mind for quite some time. I did share them with my team up in Brisbane at a workshop we had recently. But what I want to do is boil membership down to 4 very simple concepts. And it's around those 4 concepts that I do all of my work. And I think everything in a membership conversation fits into one of these things I'm about to show you. So fingers crossed this is going to work. I'm just going to share my screen and push the button now. And can everyone see that screen all right?
I can see it.
You can see it? No worries. So let's just ask the question, what is our number one problem? Well, obviously, it's rapidly declining membership. What causes rapidly declining membership? Well, there's two things that cause that. One thing is too many people leaving, and one thing is not enough people joining. Are we all cool with that? Makes sense? So too many people leaving is what we call a retention problem, okay? And not enough people joining is what we call a recruitment problem. So just notice these two big red circles. You're about to see two more. And I want to break this down just a little bit further. So why do we have retention problems? Well, there are external reasons and there are internal reasons that people leave Rotary. So external reasons are some of those obvious ones, like when people die, when people leave through ill health, when people are relocated for either family reasons or work reasons, personal trauma, that sort of stuff. People leaving Rotary through no fault of the club that is just completely beyond our control, okay? Internal reasons are obviously to do with things going on inside the club. What can we do about those external reasons? Nothing. We've just got to be able to recruit against those losses for uncontrollable or external reasons. If we follow this through, though, to what are the internal reasons? Well, they're all due to the Rotary product. And there's another big red circle, which I'm going to get back to soon. I'm going to dart down to the bottom half of the page just for a moment and talk about recruitment. And there's two major reasons we're having trouble with recruitment. They are people don't like what we're offering or people don't know what we're offering. Very simple, basic points. Let's follow these through. If they don't know what we're offering, that's a promotion problem. We're not telling the story. If they don't like what we're doing, well, guess what? That's back to the product again. So we've got four big red circles there. And for me, they are the four cornerstones of membership development. Every issue we've got is linked to one of those red circles. Okay, and I specifically want to focus in on the product and the promotion. So if you think of any product you can possibly sell, widgets, new cars, a restaurant, a plumbing service, you've got to have both a good product, but you've got to promote it out to the wider audience. So there's no use having the best plumbing service in town or the best restaurant if no one knows about you. Likewise, it's no use spending all your money on a great promotional campaign, TV, billboards, advertising, social media, websites, if the product's no good. If everyone comes to your restaurant because you've got this magnificent promotional campaign, but the food's horrible, the price is too high, the service is horrible, it's cold, there's a draft, all this sort of stuff, you've got to have those two things. So the product and promotion are really, really important in Rotary, that we get both of those right. And I think the product is the number one. Until we get that product right, and we need to recognise we've got two distinct marketplaces that we are providing our product to. We have our internal marketplace of our members and our would-be members who we need to get that product right for. But we also have that external marketplace or market segment of our community for whom we do all the work that we do. We need to have a product that suits what they're looking for as well. So the product is number one in my mind. The product is the target of our cultural transformation that we need to get right. And only when we get that product right can we then work on how well are we promoting it. And if we get a great product and we have great promotion, I feel that the retention and recruitment bonuses will come downstream of that. We can't be too fussed about retention and recruitment if we don't have a great product and we don't tell our story well. So again, just trying to make this very basic and very simple. Everything I talk about in membership fits into one of those red circles: retention, recruitment, but they're both downstream from the product and the promotion. Hopefully that's fairly simple for everyone to wrap their minds around. I'm just going to stop sharing that screen now. Okay, there we go. How's that?
Looks pretty good to me.
Okay, hopefully that makes sense to everyone.
There is I think, an important element here, because in terms of getting the product right, in our conversations prior, you've mentioned clubs that are actually doing rather well. The thing we need to sort is it universally bad, or is it that there are some beacons of hope out there with perhaps a bunch of others who need to improve?
Well, I think we really need to sing our praises. We've got some clubs out there doing some amazing, amazing work, and we need to recognise that. But we've got some clubs out there that need a bit of help as well. And when it comes to what I'm trying to achieve at zone level, I'm very much focused on the macro and not the micro. So more about the overall strategy rather than individually helping every club singly. We do have other mechanisms for that, which we'll talk out a little bit later. But Kero, I reckon I can loosely categorise every club into one of three loose sort of groups. Group one, I would loosely categorise as the clubs that are doing really, really well. They're going gangbusters, great projects, great programs, great meetings, great everything. And they don't really need any help because they're doing really, really well. They're setting the bar really, really high. We then have category two, which are the clubs that perhaps aren't doing so well in some areas, and they definitely need some support. But importantly, they're actually willing to take on advice and ideas and try and innovate and try and change, and they're interested in trying new things. Category three is a club similar to category two that is maybe struggling a little bit and needs support, but unfortunately, they're just not interested in change. They're not interested in support. They don't want to hear about innovation. They don't want to try new things. And I've got a bit of a theory that we have two sorts of problems in clubs. They are what I call knowledge problems and will problems. So when people ask me, what are you going to do to support clubs? One of the first things I want to try and investigate is, does that club have a knowledge problem, i.e. they'd really like to improve, but they're just not quite sure how to go about it? Or does that club have a will problem in that it wouldn't matter what solution you put to them, they're not interested in trying anything else? And I've got to be completely honest here. And again, we've only got limited resources, limited people, limited finances, and limited time. I've got to focus on all of my efforts and all of our zone team's efforts on the clubs that are sort of in that middle group, the clubs that do need help and are willing to change and take on new ideas. And we've got to be very careful about how much time we spend with clubs that have shown historically that they're just not remotely interested in change. And one of the things I am keen to look at in some of those clubs is it the case that the whole club is completely against change, or that it just sort of comes across that way because there are change makers and great leaders and innovators in those clubs who want to move things along, but there's a small minority, or sometimes even just one member, who have disproportionate influence in that club, who have the whole sort of over my dead body, are we going to change anything in this club sort of mindset. And they're dragging the rest of the club down to their sort of level of comfort. There's a great quote by P.T. Barnum, which is, "Comfort is the enemy of progress." And there's another little story that I tell every now and then of the goings on when the Titanic was on its way sort of underwater and they're trying to fill the lifeboats. And there were some people in first class that were sitting in those really comfortable sofas with the lovely music playing and the really comfortable sort of lounges who didn't want to get in the lifeboats because they were crammed and the seats weren't so comfortable and it was very cold out there. And, they were really going to be taken out of their comfort zone. So they decided to stay where they are. And I think we've got some clubs that are in that exact same position and some members that are in that exact same position that they can maybe see what's going on outside the club, but for them, comfort is the number one priority, and they will stay on that ship until it sinks rather than get into the lifeboats, which have been offered at district level in the past by district leaders, district membership chairs, and I'm very keen to offer that sort of support moving forward. But we do have to be very careful that we're not spending too much time on clubs that really aren't interested in change. And that's really blunt, but I've sort of made up my mind a long time ago. I'd rather be completely honest with an audience than try and tell them what they want to hear. And I can see a lot of heads sort of nodding in my little Brady Bunch sort of style grid. It's something we've got to be very cautious of. And, I'm very much aware that there's clubs close to handing in their charters, and that's terrible. We've had, I think, about 75 clubs hand in their charters in the last 4 years or so. I stand corrected on that, but it's something like that. And of course, every time a club hands in its charters, it's not just we're losing a charter of a club. They're taking 10, 20, 25 members with them at a time. So when we see these massive numbers of membership decline, we're thinking of the individual members who are leaving Rotary. We're not always thinking of the 10 or 20 or 25 going in one hit every time a club hands in its charter. And sure, some of those members are moving into other clubs and continuing their Rotary journey, but a lot of them aren't. So club closures are causing a lot of our membership drain at the moment, unfortunately.
They certainly are. Yes, they certainly are. So the issue there is that you've got to be very selective in terms of, or we've got to be very selective in terms of really only investing in clubs that are serious about moving forward.
Yeah, look, I think so. I definitely think it's worth asking the question. We want to have resources available for every club and every Rotarian right across the zone. And there will be some more intensive programs, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Fit for Purpose program later. And there will be other resources available, such as the Rotary specialists, particularly for membership, also the Rotary community leaders. And Kerry, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the sort of resources and support they're going to provide. We're very keen to look at some other things at zone level to support as well. And when the time's right, I'll have a bit of a chat about that. So we don't want to really lock anyone out, but I'm cautious about making sure we make it very clear that if your club is willing to take on new ideas and innovate, we're here to support you 100%. If your club's not remotely interested in change, there's probably not a lot we can do for you, to be honest.
Fair enough. Tell us about your job. The Zone 8 Chair of Club and Cultural Transformation suggests all sorts of spectacular things. It's quite a fancy title there. But what's the role all about? I mean, you've touched on some things, but what does the job actually do?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's one of the things I became aware of probably a little while ago is that district leaders have been quite good at talking about change and the need for change for as long as I can remember. As long as I've been in Rotary, in fact, which is coming up on 27 years, I remember district leaders getting up and saying, change is important, and global leaders for that matter. But we probably haven't been that great at talking about the specifics of change and what things need to change. Now, some people have heard about these. I'm not going to spend a lot of time banging on about them, but I've worked on what I call my 8 elements of cultural transformation. Now, some of these things, as I quickly go through them, will recognise that clubs have already been on this journey and the organisation as a whole has been on this journey of transformation for some time, and we're a long way down the path. Some of these things, as you'll sort of discover, we've really only just started that journey. We've got a long way to go. And club by club, we're going to be at different levels on these journeys. So I would also encourage clubs to look at where they're at on these individual elements of cultural transformation. I just want to move through them fairly quickly. The largest cultural transformation this organisation has ever seen, without a shadow of a doubt, is the transformation from a male-only organisation to a unisex organisation. So it's actually 35 years this year since that council legislation change back in 1989 that permitted us to introduce women into Rotary. And 35 years later, I think some clubs are doing well, but some clubs are actually still struggling with that. So I think on a whole, we've probably got to give a reasonable tick to that cultural transformation, because there's no doubt that has transformed the organisation for the good. But we've still got a little bit of a way to go there. There are some clubs where women are not very present. They're not as welcomed. My club, for the record, has remained at least 2/3 women through its whole tenure. And one of the women reminded me, who was sitting next to you the other night, Kero, that it was actually more like 3/4 women, and she might be right. But as an organisation, I think we're doing okay there. Statistically, over the last 15 years or so across Zone 8, I don't know about the rest of the world, but for every male that's been inducted, we've inducted a female. So the inductions have been at about 50% for the last 15 years. And I think that's actually pretty good. So given that the blokes had an 85-year head start in the organisation, that probably explains why there's still quite a way to go before parity. But that's probably the most obvious example of cultural transformation. We're slowly transforming from an exclusive organisation to an inclusive organisation. Now, when I first started coming to Rotary meetings as a Rotaractor who was sponsored by that sponsoring Rotary club, there were no women in the club at the time. So this was late 80s, early 90s. It did take a while for them to catch on. But I remember a very exclusive organisation. It was all men in suits. They were all the sort of lawyers and doctors and dentists and corporate leaders around the community. And it did have a bit of a sort of stuffy nature to it, notwithstanding the amazing work they were doing in the organisation. But as a young sort of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old sort of getting involved in Rotary then, I saw it as a very exclusive organisation. And I think slowly we are becoming a more inclusive organisation. And again, some clubs are doing a lot better on that metric than others, but still a fair way to go. The third area I just want to talk about is our transformation from a covert organisation to an overt organisation. And what I mean by that is that we've traditionally been quite good at hiding the light under the bushel and not talking about our great work. So this is really about our ability to be open and transparent and telling the world what we're doing. So being more overt about what we do than covert. We've traditionally been a very attendance-focused organisation. And for someone like me who joined Rotary sort of in the 90s, for many, many years, we had to turn up to the attendance office and have our name ticked off the list. And you would be spoken to if you missed like 2 or 3 meetings in a row and you had to do your makeups. We were very much focused on attendance. And I think it was around about 2003, 2004 that Rotary leaders, global leaders, were starting to talk more about venerating sort of engagement or focusing on engagement more than attendance. I think we've done fairly well on that. Maybe cultures outside of Zone 8 might be a little bit different to that, but I think across, well, at least my experience across Australia and New Zealand, I must admit I don't have a lot of experience of the island sort of culture. I think we are becoming definitely more engagement focused and less attendance focused. There's also the cultural transformation from a rigid organisation to a flexible organisation. We were very much sort of sticklers for rules, and I think slowly we're becoming a bit more flexible with the way members engage with the club. And flexibility isn't even so much about like how many meetings and stuff you go to. It's about things like, can your members pay their fees off weekly or monthly or quarterly rather than one big lump sum? Can members come along and bring their young children along to meetings? Like, is it flexible enough to be able to cope with them? Can we have people joining via Zoom if they can't get to the meeting? So flexibility isn't necessarily about our constitution and those documents. It's about how we invite people to engage with the organisation. We've been very much in the past an organisation of business leaders, and over years that has morphed into an organisation of business and community leaders. So I think we've done quite well on that one as well. About looking at the great leaders we have at community level, not forgetting those business leaders, they're still really important, but just looking at the other people who are leaders in other methods, in other ways around our community and how we can engage them. We're culturally transforming from a very formal organisation to a very informal organisation in some areas. I remember when I first started coming to Rotary 20 odd plus years ago, it was suit and tie every week. I don't think I've worn a tie more than about 5 times in the last 5 years now, and that's probably including a few weddings and funerals in there. So we are slowly changing that to become a little less formal. But again, I think some clubs probably have a little bit further to go, and probably club to club, some clubs are a bit more formal than others. And if it works for their community and their membership group, I think that's great, as long as we do have some less formal options with the Rotary clubs that we have out there. And my big one that I've been banging on about easily for over the last 10 years, and I personally think this is the one we need to work hardest on and do the most work on, and that is our transition from a meeting-centric culture to a service-centric culture. Okay, so that rather than having meetings at the centre of the Rotary universe and everything sort of orbiting around meetings, we put service at the centre of the Rotary universe and have everything, including meetings, sort of orbiting around that. And I'm not suggesting that meetings aren't important. I'm just suggesting that, service above self is our motto. You actually don't find the word meeting in any of our 4-way test or our 7 international areas of focus or any of the 70-odd international presidential themes or our 5 avenues of service or any of that stuff. Yet we do seem to be a very meeting-centric organisation. And I think we need to shift focus and become a more service-centric organisation. We focus more on service and impact, which is our raison d'etre, our reason for being. I think that is one of the real keys to turning around the culture of the organisation. So if every club has a bit of a think about those 8 sort of elements of cultural transformation and thinks, where is our club on a sliding scale? On some areas, they might be right at one end. On some areas, they might be right at the very other end. But I think these are the areas we need to try and transition to. And that's a long way of answering the question, what is my role? But from a cultural transformation perspective, I think they're the things we need to be looking at. The other sort of elements that we're looking at zone level, also including membership learning and development, which I'll talk about shortly. We do have the Fit for Purpose program, which I want to talk about shortly. We do have, I'm very keen to do an online audit of every club across the zone. I want to look at what their websites look like, what their social media looks like, whether it be Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or whatever, Pinterest, whatever social media they're using. I'm very concerned that for a lot of clubs, their online presence is, for want of a different word, is not fit for purpose. It's more of a turn off or a barrier to membership than something that attracts people to membership. I've gone to a lot of websites and you try and find the contact us button and it either doesn't work or it goes to a page or the phone number's wrong. They have presidential themes that are 5 years old on them. They've got all sorts of stuff about bulletins and meeting rules and stuff on the front page where the average non-Rotarian viewer is not interested. They need to be talking about the projects and the impact they're making and how people can perhaps volunteer, but they need a lot of work. And to be fair, there's some amazing Rotary websites out there. So let's not tar them all with the same brush. And then it comes to the social media side of things. I'm a very heavy follower of Facebook. I'm on it all the time. I post a lot. Our club posts a lot. We've got a very prominent page in our club, and we are very careful how we curate the imagery and the posts that goes on there. The Rotary Club of Seaford Facebook page has over 2,000 followers, which is extremely high compared to a lot of clubs, and we're very careful to keep growing that page and keeping it really present out there. But when I've liked a lot of Facebook pages, and I obviously know a lot of Rotarians across the world. Some of the stuff that I see presented as Rotary content, the sort of stuff that people are thinking, oh, this is going to attract people to Rotary, I think is actually doing us a disservice and is counterproductive and would actually be better for the organisation if it was never posted in the first place. And again, I've got to call it as I see it. There's a good news story, there's a bad news story here. The good news story, sorry, I'll start with the bad news story. The bad news story is that I reckon the average Rotary Club, out of all their followers, probably at least 3/4 of them are fellow Rotarians from their clubs and other clubs. That's the bad news. The good news is 3/4 of those followers are Rotarians. So it's only Rotarians that are seeing the really horrible stuff and not the general public. So there's a bit of good news, bad news about that, but I'm very keen that zone-wide we do a bit of an audit on what's going on out there. So, and we've obviously got our public image team, who I'm not going to speak on behalf of on the regional council. They're going to be more focused on the macro, on the wider communication and promotional plans, and not so much every individual club. I'm sure they will have some resources available, and there will be support from Rotary specialists and obviously the Rotary community leaders will play some sort of role in there in directing traffic as well. But yeah, that's something I'm really keen to look into. And the final thing that we're overlooking and your West Australian Simone Collins is doing a lot of work on this, is having a great repository for Rotary membership learning and development and content. So there's a lot of amazing content out there. Top of the list, obviously, is the Membership Voice podcast, which has an amazing back catalogue of great interviews about membership inspiration. But we've also got Rotary on the Move. We've got various blogs. I've blogged for a long time. There's Rotary official membership content. There's Membership Minute, and there's stuff that comes out from Evanston. There's a lot of great resources out there, but they're all in different places and they're all a little bit hard to find. So we're very keen once the new Zone website gets up and running, and I know Simone Collins is working very hard on this, is getting a great directory of all that content all in one place. So people at club level, people at district level, Rotary specialists and community leaders have a great resource for membership content that they can just go to and go, right, it's all on this page, and we can get it all in one place and find out some of those other great blogs and articles and stuff and put them in there as well. So they're sort of the areas we're looking into without going into anything in a lot of detail, and I will go into some of them in a bit of detail a little bit down the track.
Thanks, Mark. Just in terms of that flexible culture, Jesse Harmon has said that clubs need to be member-centric. In other words, the service above self that leaders put in should have a focus on the member experience.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree entirely. And that's when I talk about the product, and I mentioned before, there's definitely two definite market segments there. One of those markets is our members. We've got to have a great product for our members, because if we don't do that first, well, we're not going to have members. So we do have to absolutely look after that and have a great product for our members, but just reminding them that we're there for our community as well, and we've got to make sure the product is right for our community as well. But yeah, I agree 100%. 100%.
Fantastic. Well, picking up on a couple of things you mentioned there, and I think I'll go to the learning and development side of it first. If not necessarily an area that we want to spend a lot of time on, but how do you see L&D improving the Rotary experience for our members?
Well, my first trick is to get learning and development into my vernacular and training out of it. So if I do mention the T word, forgive me, I'm still learning. It's all about learning and development. Because T has always been the T in pets, right? So I don't know what the new acronym is going to be, but forgive me if I slip into that old word and use the word training. Look, something I've been very conscious of, and I've been in a very unique and privileged position to have visited probably 3/4 of the district around the zone to speak at various membership conferences and seminars and, pets and district assemblies and that sort of stuff. And when you do that, you can't help but compare district by district to the experiences you've had. And I've come away from some of the district events that I've spoken at just being blown away by the professionalism and the quality of the speakers, and just the innovation and the feel and the aura of the whole event just knocked me for six. I've just been really, really impressed. Conversely, I've got to be honest and say I've come away from some of these events feeling a bit sort of underwhelmed. And I'll clarify what I'm saying here. It may well just be, and I'm very much aware that some of these things change year by year. So it could be the case that one of those districts where I've gone to an event and I've just been blown away by, the year before and the year after might not have been so flash. And conversely, one or two of the events I've gone to that I wasn't really super impressed by, the year before and after might have been amazing. So I know some of these things change, but that speaks to the consistency of our learning and development. And I believe very strongly that, we talk about consistent membership development across the zone. I ask the question, how can we have consistent membership development if the training or learning and development we're providing is the complete opposite of consistency? So it strikes me that, we're all Rotarians, we're all paying our dues, some of which go to districts and some of which go to Rotary International. But for these arbitrary district boundaries where we happen to live, and some of us might be right on the edge of a district boundary, and some of us might be right smack in the middle of one. And obviously there's very big districts like WA and smaller ones such as Tasmania and parts of Melbourne and around Sydney, geographically. Those arbitrary district borders can really determine what sort of quality you get in the training or the learning and development, okay? So the number one thing I'm really keen on when we look at an overhaul in membership learning and development is consistency. We've got to have a product that is consistently delivered right across the zone. So we're getting consistency in those messages. The second thing there's three elements to the membership learning and development that I want to work on. So consistency is the number one. The second one is about relevance. I see a lot of content that comes from Evanston that is not written in a vernacular that is suitable or for an environment for a Zone 8 audience, and even across Zone 8, from Australian and New Zealand cultures. That's going to change a lot when you get into some of the islands and out of Tonga and Solomon Islands and Kiribati and PNG and that sort of stuff. So we've got to be very conscious about the relevance. And that's what I talk about consistency, but there does need to be a little bit of difference in the context for the relevance of different parts. But But I think a lot of what comes out of the States is not particularly relevant to our cultures. So we need to work on that. And the third word I want to say is accessible. So it's no use having consistent and relevant content delivered if not everyone can get hold of it or be a part of it. Now, I appreciate, Kero, you're in a very large district. The one I'm in may or may not be the second largest in the zone. I'm just sort of, as far as square kilometres, I'm not quite sure to be up there. And, you know, we've got clubs in Alice Springs. This is my district. We've got clubs in Alice Springs, Broken Hill, obviously a lot in Adelaide, out to Whyalla, down to Port Lincoln. And like Alice Springs to Adelaide is like 15, 20 hours in a car. So we might have the most amazing, inspirational, relevant and consistent learning and development here in Adelaide. But if you can't easily get there from Broken Hill or Port Lincoln or Port Augusta or Alice Springs, well, that's not accessible for you. Or, you know, I'll just give another example. My current club president, when it was time for her pets last year, she was on a plane flying back from overseas. She had a holiday she booked overseas a year prior, and there's just no way she was going to be able to make that pets. So, and she's a great president, so she's done really, really well. But sometimes you've broken a leg or you're COVID or you're in hospital or you've got some family emergency or you're in a plane heading across the Pacific or something, and you just can't get to those events, or you're really isolated. So we've got to make sure our learning and development, and this is not just for membership, it's for all areas, is accessible to everyone who's paying their RI dues. So we have to have more access to really good quality online learning and development. But we've also got to be conscious that some people are not really comfortable online as well. So we've got to build all those things into the system so that everyone has an equitable access to really good quality stuff. So they're my top three words: relevance, consistency, and accessibility. And that's something I'm really keen to work on. I'm not really quite sure, to be honest, what district level training is going to look like for next year for the training of the 2025-26 leaders, so the pets and the district assemblies that are going to be sort of March, April, May sort of thing next year. We are definitely going to work on a lot of the membership content that goes into that. I'm not really sure what the rest is going to look like. But yeah, we've got a lot of work ahead of us to work on that membership content, if nothing else, so that everyone gets the same access to some great content, and our team's going to develop quite a lot of that ourselves. So yeah, watch this space. That's not the number one priority at the moment, but it soon will be.
Super. Thanks, Mark. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, looking at one element of development, club development, people development, that has had a very high profile recently, and for good reason, and that's the Fit for Purpose program that you're working on,
yep,
which is, as I understand it, to be rolled out reasonably soon. Tell us about it. Like, what's it about? I mean, it was called a boot camp or something at one stage. Name's been changed. So can you put all that in context, please, and
sure.
tell us more about it?
Yeah, so this was one of the crazy ideas I gave Andy about 12 months ago. And I'll just give a little bit of background into it first, and a little bit about the history of how the Rotary Club of Seaford came about. So I served for 3 years as a district membership chair back in when 9520 was a district. That merged not long after that with 9500 and became 9510. And I know, Gerald, you've been district membership chair as well. I'm sure we've got some amongst us tonight. And I served for 3 years in that role. And I, hand on heart, think I did the absolute best I could at trying to deliver innovation and ideas and share best practice around the district at the time. I spoke to a lot of clubs. And one thing that I can say really uniquely that I don't think a lot of people would be able to say, I spoke at that district assembly, or might have been Pets, can't remember, 5 years in a row, right? So even a district governor's only going to be there sort of once to introduce and once to talk and that. So that's probably pretty rare. So I got to deliver membership innovation and content 5 years in a row at the same event. And I mean, I changed it a little bit year to year, but one of the things you notice when you do it over that period of time is the repetition in what happens. So you deliver this amazing content, you can see all the light bulbs flicking on and the heads out there in the audience. Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to go back to the club and do this. And then what happens is 12 months later, you get the next crew come in hopefully a slightly different message, but nothing's changed in those clubs. And then a year later, and so I saw this for 5 years, okay? And over that time, the membership just kept declining. And it was not for, I'm hoping it's not for a want of the quality of the content that was delivered. I certainly had so many people come to us, oh, that's a fabulous idea, we're going to try that in my club, blah, 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 blah. But something happened between the 1st of July when they came in as president or were on that new board or had to sort of convince a new board or whatever. Something happened between the 1st of July and probably, I don't know, March or whatever, when the next training season started, that prevented all of those great ideas from getting implemented. And I did get quite frustrated about that. And I thought, surely it's not the ideas, because I'm sharing best practice that I found everywhere. And I had this idea, I reckon I would start up my own club and just implemented all this stuff. It'll do really, really well. And the opportunity for CFID came up and I started the club. And I don't want to gloss over that because it was about a 2-year process getting it up and running. And there were a lot of people who said, oh, it's never going to work and all this sort of stuff. But you know what? The club got up and running. And interestingly, there was some criticism, particularly from some of the surrounding clubs at the time and various guises that maybe we shouldn't be starting a new club, we should be focusing on existing clubs, that sort of stuff, which I'd been doing for the previous 5 years. But interestingly, once our club had been up and running for a while, how many of ideas were being adopted by surrounding clubs? I thought, oh, that's a great way of doing it. We might do it that way. And slowly that sort of osmosis has sort of set in. So that's a long way of saying what I'm about to say. I'm convinced if clubs actually try new ideas, things will work. And we had this conversation about the difference between knowledge problems and will problems. I actually, these days, every time I do a presentation, I started off with this quote. And the quote goes like this: our inability to reverse our membership decline is due not to a lack of knowledge, but due to a lack of will. Right? And I say that at the start of them. So to explain that, globally, our Rotary leaders actually have a very good understanding of what's going on, of what's got us into this predicament, and of what's required to get us out of it. So our membership problems is not an understanding problem. It's about implementation that's not happening. And what I learned over the time with those clubs was that the number one reason that clubs will not implement a program of change, or club leaders, should I say, is they've got this paralysing fear that if the pace of change is too fast, they're going to lose members. That's the number one reason these things don't get implemented. But I want to embolden club leaders with this little tidbit of knowledge, that I will concede that over time we have lost some members who have felt the pace of change has been too fast. I'll admit that. But here's the kicker, and you need to really understand this bit. We would have lost 5 times as many members over the years who have left because they've felt the pace of change has been too slow. And that doesn't take into account all the people who've never joined us in the first place because they felt the pace of change has been too slow. So don't let that paralysing fear that you're going to lose members stop a journey of change in clubland. So one of the things I suggested to Andy is, if we select 100 clubs that are going to prove to us that they've got a will to take on new ideas and change, put them through what I then called a boot camp, and I've been asked to change the terminology. Put them through a boot camp where we're going to train them, give some intense training, get the best speakers I can get. And here's the kicker. The clubs have to sign an agreement in order to get into this program that they will, W-I-L-L, will implement the changes that come out of this. They're now called club transformation workshops. So what's going to happen in the lead up to this is that we're going to, very soon, there'll be a full information package. We've sent out some information. We're still working on some. We've still got budgets we're working through. They'll hopefully within the next week, certainly before the end of June, the full information will go out to all clubs and it'll be promoted everywhere. And clubs will then be in a position to fill out the application form and say, yep, we want to be a part of this. They've got to sign the participation agreement up front saying that they will implement for a full trial period up till the end of the pilot, which ends at the end of the, regionalisation pilot, which is June 30, 2026. If they want to pull out of whatever the changes are after then, well, that's good. They can go for that. But I think if they genuinely implement this stuff, they will see extraordinary change. And we're not just going to force things upon clubs that we know that they're going to hate. Each club has to send a delegate to this club transformation workshop that is like one of the club champions of change, someone who's a real go-getter. And we will have club fitness coaches that will work with them at that weekend to look at the SWOT analysis of what's going on in their club and also what they learn at the event to come up with a fitness plan. Okay. Now, I had a bit of a chat to you, Caro, off air about this, and I want you to think of, I want everyone listening to sort of draw the analogy to a personal fitness trainer. And maybe I'm not the best person to describe this, but let's say we all decided we wanted to get a lot fitter and we engaged the service of a professional fitness trainer. Well, that fitness trainer would have a chat to us and talk about our targets and what we wanted to achieve. And they would draw up a plan and they would say, right, well, every week, twice a week, we're going to meet in the park. We're going to do exercise or whatever. Maybe once a week, you go for a jog or you go for a bike ride or you go for a swim or whatever. We're going to look at your diet. We're going to look at you're going to give up the fags, you're going to give up the booze, all this sort of stuff. And I'll guarantee you, if anyone pays a professional fitness trainer and does exactly what they tell them to for 12 months, they're going to have an amazing transformation at the end of that. And I think everyone would agree with that. You've got to be accredited to be in a position like that and know what you're talking about as a trainer. So in the same way, I am 100% convinced that if we come up with a plan, a bespoke individual plan for each club about what your issues are and how we're going to address them and what you need to change, and you stick to that plan, then at the end of the 2-year pilot, I'm going to have 100 amazing examples of transformation across the zone, and they will be a beacon to the rest of the zone of what's possible when you actually don't just talk about change, but implement, that's the word, implement change at club level. And people are going to get uncomfortable about it at first, but I'm convinced that we'll have the 100 amazing examples at the end, and the rest of the Rotary world, we're looking, wow, that's amazing. Who's going to be in the next 100 clubs that we put through this? But here's the thing. If, like your personal fitness campaign, after 2 months, you say to your trainer, you know what, I really struggle getting out of bed at 6 o'clock. Maybe we'll give up the working out in the park. And, I've got a dicky knee. I can't really go running once a week. And you know what, I'm sorry, I just can't give up the booze. Like, how well is your fitness campaign going to work? What are your results going to be in 12 months? Nothing. So we don't want to have that situations with clubs coming into this and deciding 2 months down the track, well, no, actually, we're not prepared to implement that. So there'll be a high level of screening. And I want to be crystal clear about this. We are only interested in clubs for this program that are fair dinkum. Now, that's an Australian term, but hopefully it's recognised right across the zone, that are fair dinkum about change. If they come into this, if they apply for this program, and our history shows us through RI records that they have steadfastly been, and we'll do our background checks, that they have steadfastly been against any form of change for the last 10 years. And that's why they've gone from 30 members to 10 and that sort of stuff. They're just not going to get into the program. So it is a very exclusive program, specifically for 100 clubs that we really feel we can make a genuine change in. And part of the coaching and transformation workshops will be about change management and change leadership and that sort of stuff as well. But I reckon if you turn up at some sort of membership event with the full backing that whatever you see presented and hear and like the idea of and make a note of is going to get implemented at your club, rather than what happens when you turn up to a membership event and you think, that's a great idea. Then in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, no, that'd never wash at my club. I reckon the results will be amazing. So I'm really counting on getting 100 really switched on clubs into this program and showing the Rotary world what we can do. So part of this will be obviously the club transformation workshops, which I'm hoping will happen in September. Part of it will also be that personalised club fitness plan that our coaches will be preparing for the clubs. So each coach is going to have up to 6 clubs to work with. And those coaches are going to be contacting your club every quarter to check on your progress, to check on what's been implemented, to get information back on you, what's working, what's not, what have you had trouble implementing, what haven't you, this sort of stuff. So it's going to be constant monitoring of the whole thing. So at the end, we can get some clear results on what seems to work and what doesn't, and what is possible when you're prepared to come at things with an open mind and take on the innovation.
Fantastic.
That's a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. Mark, a question about the relationship between your membership or the membership function and Rotary community groups and leaders. How do you see that working?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked, Caro, and I'm actually glad you're on the program because I happen to know that you are starting a new role as of July 1 as well, and you're going to be one of our amazing Rotary community leaders looking after a Rotary community group. Yes. And I happen to know you underwent some training last week because my club were invited to be at that training, at a dinner to sort of have a bit of a chin wag. And I actually feel really privileged. We were asked to sort of be a representative of modern flexible Rotary. So it was great to be there. And I haven't chatted to you a lot for a while, Kiro, but now it's about 3 times in a week. So I'm actually really keen to hear your take on, I guess, where there may be some crossover or overlap or dovetailing, is that a good word, between Rotary community leaders and the Rotary zone membership portfolio team, because we want to get some great information out there and have some great resources. I haven't mentioned the Rotary specialists, which we're still looking for, that clubs can use as an individual resource. Carol, I'm very keen to hear some of your thoughts on how the role of the Rotary community leader can sort of dovetail into future growth for Rotary in the zone.
Well, Mark, as I see it, the Rotary community leaders are crucial to the success of this thing, because their role is pretty simple. Rotary community leaders' role is to facilitate a group of clubs to collaborate as they never have before, to build relationships, to help those clubs to connect with resources like the membership specialists that you've talked about and other types of specialists. But fundamentally, it's about helping those clubs to identify their strengths, to get them, to enable them to work together to improve their impact in the community, and to essentially rebuild our network and to improve their impact in the community. What the community leader's not about is being a newfangled AG in terms of controlling clubs. They're not there to do things for the clubs. They're to help clubs, to facilitate club contacts with people and specialists and resources that the clubs can utilise to get a better future. It's the relationship, as has been described, between the specialists, between the Rotary community leaders and specialists, is essentially one where the community leader helps a club to connect with a specialist. If the community leaders, who might also be specialists, start doing the specialist role as well, I fear that it's going to be a slippery slope that is going to end badly, because I think it's a pretty simple concept. But yeah, so that's it. This is, and of course, one of the issues we have at the moment is a lot of people are holding back and not putting their hands up to become specialists, which may compromise results out there where basically the pedal meets the metal, as they say. So therein lies, to me, one of the key things is to get more specialists and to have more specialists available for the community groups. It's a club-centric program. Clubs are central to it.
Very good. Thank you. Just briefly, Carrie, I'm completely happy to go with questions. I've probably covered what I need to. If you want to go on with that.